let the games begin.
Released in 2017, this definitive edition of Divinity Original Sin 2 was greeted with widespread acclaim. Some 8 years later, is the game still divine, or does it need to confess its sins? Let's find out, shall we? In Divinity Original Sin 2, we once again enter the richly detailed fantasy world of Rivellon, where the use of source magic, a powerful but dangerous force, is strictly forbidden. The game begins with the player as a sorcerer, a magic user who has been captured by the Divine Order, a tyrannical organisation led by the delusional and arrogant leader of the Magisters, Bishop Alexander. The Order claims to be protecting the world from Voidwoken, monstrous creatures that are attracted whenever source magic is used. You are duly sent to the ironically named prison island of Fort Joy aboard the ship Merryweather, although the pleasant sailing conditions are somewhat spoilt by an attack from an enormous kraken. On the verge of drowning, you're suddenly saved by a mysterious force. Washed up on the shores of Fort Joy, you begin your quest for answers and witness firsthand the brutal treatment of sorcerers by Alexander and his right-hand woman Dallis. You eventually manage to escape the confines of Fort Joy and run into the Seekers, who reveal you are a Godwoken, a chosen individual destined to ascend to divinity and replace the deceased divine and Bishop Alexander's father, Lucian. However, the journey to godhood is fraught with challenges, including rival Godwoken, factions vying for control of Rivellon, and a constant threat of the Void, a dark force seeking to consume the world. Like the first game, the story of Divinity Original Sin 2 is not going to blow you away with its originality. Lowly character finds out they are the chosen one is territory that's been covered more times than I could comfortably count, but it is a well-written fantasy yarn with plenty of interesting events and characters to keep you hooked, and pacing of the story is also well thought through, with a healthy handful of twists and turns to keep you on your toes. I would describe the story as perfectly acceptable. It's not winning originality points, but it's a well-written piece of fantasy that acts as a great vehicle for the gameplay.
You're nice. Emmy would have loved you.
In my review of the first game, I described the graphical style as being somewhat cartoonish, with a bold colour palette that made the game pop off your screen. In the sequel, this style has been changed, and frankly I think it's for the better. The graphics are a more realistically portrayed style with a more muted colour palette. The level of detail in the landscapes has been taken up a fair few notches, from the grim, oppressive Fort Joy to the mystical Nameless Isle and the bustling city of Arx. Each location is meticulously crafted with excellent textures and liberal use of environmental storytelling. Lighting and shadow has also seen an uplift in quality over the first game, further increasing the great world building on display. Character models have also seen a bump in quality, with intricate armour, clothing and weapon designs. The many different NPCs, animals and enemies you come across are also well crafted and look great. Add in excellent animation to this package of graphical upgrades and you have a fantastic looking game. So the game looks amazing, but you might be wondering, what impact does this have on performance? Well, I'm happy to say that the game runs really smoothly. My mid-range rig, specs in the description box if you're interested, ran the game on ultra settings without missing a beat. Frame rates were impressively high and frame pacing was nice and steady. And while I'm on the subject of performance, I'd like to add that I've also racked up over 240 hours playing this game on the Nintendo Switch, and hats off to Larian, this is a stellar port. Of course it doesn't look as pretty on Switch as on PC, but it's a very respectable experience. Frame rates, although noticeably lower, are still steady, and that all-important frame pacing is also good. If like me you're prone to motion sickness, dodgy frame pacing can cause issues, but my literal gut feeling was telling me this version is fine. Playing on a controller has also been handled well. If you're thinking about the Switch version, then don't hesitate, it's a great way to play the game. With its highly detailed areas and characters, silky animations, atmospheric lighting and great performance, Divinity Original Sin 2 scores an impressive 23 out of 25 for graphics.
And the Magisters pointed their fingers at me. Just as I'd planned.
Gameplay in Divinity Original Sin 2 kicks off in much the same way as the first game. After picking either a pre-built character from the 6 on offer or cooking up your own, you're placed aboard the Merryweather, a Magister ship bound for the ironically named Fort Joy, a prison island for sorcerers. The Merryweather acts as a nice focused introduction to the game's many systems. You do a bit of combat, collect some items and equipment, and interact with some NPCs, giving you a chance to use the game's comprehensive speech options system. I liked this more confined intro to the game. One of the things that I didn't enjoy about the first game was the initial handful of hours. I felt myself wandering around like a spare part, wondering what to do next. But in this sequel, I found the more intimate intro area of the Merryweather and then Fort Joy to be a much more enjoyable start to the game. Once you're out of Fort Joy, you are plunged into the world proper. Each of the chapters is made up of various maps that you're free to explore, but like the first game, you will probably come up against adversaries that are a few levels above you, and you will have to go prepared or wait until you have leveled up a bit. It's the game's way of giving you some freedom while also channeling you through the story. Travelling through the game comes in the form of boat travel aboard the Lady Vengeance, which also acts as a kind of hub area for you and your party, and while on dry land, walking and fast travelling are your main ways to get around. One thing you will notice in the game's traversal is the increased verticality. It's not as pronounced as, say, Baldur's Gate 3, but your scope for getting above the action is certainly better than in the game's predecessor. On your adventures in the big wide world, you'll come across the obligatory NPCs who dole out quests to you. These quests can be sprawling affairs and usually have many ways to complete them. This is a game all about choice and player agency, and the way you handle events can have a profound effect on how things proceed for you. It's this amazing amount of choice that pulls you in. Just like in real life, you're always wondering if you just handled things in a different way, maybe things would have played out better. Of course, unlike real life, you have the F5 and F8 keys to test out your theory. The huge amount of choice in the quests is also echoed in the deep tactical turn-based combat. Everything that was great about the combat in the original game has been turned up to 11. At the start of a battle, the player with the highest initiative goes first, followed by the enemy with the highest initiative, and so on and so forth until all party members and enemies have their pecking order. Then the fun begins. Battles are grand affairs with players using their action points to perform attacks and use skills and items. You can use all your action points each turn, or you can skip your go and save action points so you can perform more actions later in the fight, giving you a tactical advantage. Players and enemies can use a mind-boggling array of weapons and magic to inflict harm on each other. Straight attacks on the enemy will only get you so far. Tactics, positioning and the environment also play a huge part in how successful you are in battle. Placing your magic or projectile flinging units to high ground will grant you attack bonuses, and keeping an eye on the ground where your foes are can also pay dividends. Casting an electric spell in a puddle of water will have the predictable effect of electrocuting anyone foolish enough to be standing in it, or breaking a barrel of oil, leaving your enemies stood in a highly flammable pool of gloop ready to be lit up, are just a few of the options available to you. As you progress and you get more inquisitive about what you can actually do, it becomes apparent that if you think you can do it, you probably can. You will find yourself luring enemies into cunning traps, isolating them by barricading them in with barrels. The options are endless. As well as using the environment to your advantage, through exploration you can also find a dizzying array of grenades, arrows and spell scrolls you can utilise in battle. You can even use the spell scrolls if your character doesn't even know the spell. This looser approach to character classes makes fights even more enjoyable, as you're not necessarily tied to fighting in a certain way. The combat in Divinity Original Sin 2 is a huge amount of fun. It's not massively different from the first game, but battles have been increased in scope and environmental complexity, giving you even more choice for how you tackle them. It's a tweaking and refinement rather than an overhaul, but as the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As you progress through the game, earning XP sees you hit level caps that then translate into points you can place in various character traits. Attributes govern things like strength and finesse, etc. Combat abilities feed into your competence with certain weapons, and civil abilities allow you to up your skill in more specialised traits like sneaking, luck and telekinesis. Every few levels you'll also get the opportunity to pick a one-off skill or talent that that lets you further hone or specialise in certain areas. The progression system in Divinity Original Sin 2 is pretty much the same as it was in the first game, but like everything else in this game, it's further honed and expanded. The gameplay in Divinity Original Sin 2 is deep, filled to the brim with choice, and above all else, massive amounts of fun. This game is a masterclass in how to build an engaging world and provides a rich RPG experience on pretty much all levels. Gameplay scores a magical 25 out of 25.
You eat Griff's hand, and you see him putting animals, dead for days in the blistering sun, whole into his cooking pot. Probably best to pass on the stew.
The music in Divinity Original Sin 2 is nothing short of sublime. It features powerful orchestral tracks interlaced with calming incidental music, fitting the on-screen action and exploration perfectly. The music in this game is so good, I found myself just hanging around in certain locations just so I could carry on listening. For those of you that watched my review of the first game, you'll know I was not a fan of the voice acting. Many characters were painful to listen to, and the rest were barely mediocre, but I'm happy to say no such problem exists with the sequel. The voice acting is dramatically improved. Once again, you have a choice of voices for your main character, and with the exception of one or two which are a bit weaker, these are pretty good. All main NPCs are well acted, and these performances help to gloss over the simplistic storyline and add some dimension to proceedings. Just about every NPC I spoke to was fully voiced, and competently so. My main takeaway about the voice acting is consistency. There are far more strong performances than the previous game, and overall the voice acting adds to the game rather than detracts like it did in its predecessor. The sound package in Divinity Original Sin 2 is a bumper pack of quality. From the truly outstanding music to the much improved voice acting, audio scores 24 out of 25.
Those Voidwoken make short bloody work of a ship. Am I the lone survivor? It seems something wanted me alive.
Divinity Original Sin 2 is a huge game, with the end credits rolling at about the 60-hour mark for a basic playthrough, and you can safely double that estimate for a do and see everything run. Like the first game, there is no real DLC on offer, just a few minor content packs that are included in this definitive edition anyway. Despite the lack of additional content, the base game has plenty to keep you busy, and due to the fact that you can build so many different combinations of character, replayability is through the roof. Each of the 14 different classes presents a different way to play, and to 100% the game and see every ending, multiple playthroughs are going to be necessary. Add to that the fact that you can also team up with some buddies to play the entire game through in co-op mode, and the game just becomes a goldmine of content, offering hundreds of hours of play, and scores 24 out of 25 for value.
Glory is mine.
Divinity Original Sin 2 is one of those rare breeds of game that delivers on so many levels that it transcends its genre. Larian poured their heart and soul into this game, and it shows. You get the feeling that this was a labour of love made by gamers for gamers. It manages to improve on Divinity Original Sin in pretty much all areas. It's bigger, it's more refined, and it's polished like a fine gem. Divinity Original Sin 2 scores an almighty 96 out of 100.